So we reached the final Sunday of the church year. So I'm not sure, we probably have talked about this before, but the church year starts in Advent. So next Sunday is the first Sunday of Advent. So we start over with a new church year. And Christ the King Sunday, which is what we're sort of celebrating and remembering today, is the last Sunday of the church year. So it's sort of a summation of everything that we've been reading this year in the Gospel of Luke. So if you remember, each of our 3 liturgical years, you sort of focus on one gospel. So next year, well, starting next week is year A, and we'll be reading a lot from Matthew. This year, starting back last November until today, we've been reading a lot from Luke. So we've been reading about the different parables and what Jesus has been doing in his ministry. So this celebration, I guess, festival of Christ the King is actually a relatively new festival. It came about in about 1925, right after World War I. So if you think about sort of that context, it started in the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church, the leaders, wanted to remind the people who was king, right? After this big war that tore apart the world, and there were powers that be, like, who is the actual power that is? Like, who is the most important power that we need to be following? Who is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords? And that's where this festival sort of came about, from that worldly sort of context. So it was a reminder for believers that it's not all these countries and leaders who have caused this war that are the most important. It's Christ as the king. So, but this image of sort of Christ as king is people who don't have a king, right? Like, it might be a little more difficult for us. So we'll get to that, but that's where this Sunday comes from. But if you think about the gospel we just read, that comes on Jesus' final day of life, right? It's on Good Friday. He's already had his trial. They've marched him out of Jerusalem to a hill, and they put him on a cross between 2 criminals. So he's not really looking so much like a king right now. And that inscription over him, this is the King of the Jews, I think that was more sort of in mocking. It wasn't so much as a label as like, this is who you say your king is. Sort of a reminder that, like, it's the Roman Empire that's in charge here. But I think the power for us that comes from this image on this Christ the King Sunday is that this is a very human Jesus, right? We've got this Jesus who lived a very human life. The criminal next to him says he didn't do anything wrong. And we know, like, he did something wrong. He fought back against the Roman Empire. And that's why he ended up where he is. So he fought for the least, and he fought for the lost, and he stood up for those who were marginalized and who were being subjugated, and all of those sort of countercultural things that we know Jesus did. That's what got him to that cross. So we have this very human Jesus who, by all rights, probably could have saved himself, right? He's the Messiah. So he could have saved himself, and he chose not to, because if he's going to live a human life, then he also will experience this human death, and then walks with us as we experience all of those things too. So pain and grief and loss, we know, is not something Jesus sort of pulled himself away from, right? He met with people who were grieving. He met with people who were weeping. He fed and clothed and walked with people who were in pain. So he spent his life sort of caring for these outcasts. He spent his life caring for the people who the powers that be did not take care of. So he promises this thief next to him, like, today you will be with me. Like, you are just as important as I am. You matter. You will have a place in God's kingdom. And that's pretty powerful, I think, for the thief It's powerful for us. We sing on All Saints Day, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Like, that's sort of our greatest hope, right? Is that we have time, we become one with Jesus. So we have all of these images of Jesus. We have this image of Jesus as a shepherd and as God running toward the prodigal son, and the one who sits and heals, and the one who eats meals with those who he shouldn't eat meals with, and the one who Zacchaeus climbs the tree to make sure he can see. So perhaps, I know for me, those are the images of Jesus that are more comforting, that are more poignant and a little more relatable, because we know that Jesus is not sort of this king who sits on this purple gilded throne and like rules from on high. Like, that's not who Jesus is. Jesus walks among us and is with us and sits with us. One of the prayers that we've been using on Tuesday morning for morning prayer comes from, I think comes from the Celtic tradition. And it says, for your love for us, compassionate and patient, which has carried us through our pain, wept beside us in our sin, and waited with us in our confusion. So I think that's the Jesus that I follow. That's the Jesus I want to strive to follow, right? Not this king who is not one who sits beside us in our pain and has compassion. And we have this Jesus who's here with us in the here and now through the joys and the trials, because he chose to live a life that was like that. He walks with us and he knows what it is to weep and to grieve and to feel pain. Our burial liturgy says, you wept beside the grave of Lazarus, your friend. I think that's a comforting image for families who are grieving, because it's a reminder that this God we follow also weeps. The shortest sentence in the Bible, Jesus wept, and it's in the context of Lazarus's death. So we have this very human Jesus. And we also have this Jesus who sort of creates resurrection, right? Brings light from darkness. And our canticle this morning, it doesn't say where it's from, but it's Zechariah's canticle, the Song of Zechariah. So pretty fitting right before Advent. So that's the song that John the Baptist's father sort of prays after he finds out, I think after John is born. So, and you can tell in there that his father's proclaiming his son as a prophet who then will proclaim Jesus, right? So, but Zechariah is saying that in the tender compassion of our God, the dawn from on high shall break upon us, to shine on those who dwell in darkness and the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. So this very human Jesus who walks beside us, who brings peace, who brings love and comfort and compassion, with a lesson like we just read this morning. I think that's sort of the power of Christ the King Sunday, right? We have this king who is not like other kings. We have this king who creates this kingdom that we can be a part of, that we can help create and help foster. We can be the hands and feet of this kingdom, as opposed to being the subjects of the kingdom. So that's the kind of kingdom I want. That's the kind of kingdom that I strive to sort of help create, and the kingdom that we all strive to be a part of. So this king of love, and this king of grace and forgiveness, resurrection and healing and wholeness. That's the image I hope that will sort of stick with you as we move forward into Advent. Amen.